Good morning. How y'all doing?
Good.
Good. So we're going to talk about a bunch of subjects today. Hopefully, you guys will find some of this interesting. Just a little bit of background on myself, who I am. Raymond Aronoff. I'm president of Flow Control Group. I was actually a graduate of University of Florida Engineering in 1995. So I graduated. I was going down the pathway of aerospace, and the year before me had like 0 job offers for any of the aerospace degrees. So they were like, you take these 2 classes, we'll make you a mechanical engineer. So I took those 2 classes. So I got them. They didn't have the combined aerospace and mechanical at that time. Started my career over at Harris Corporation, now L3 Harris. Was hired by Bill Gattle, who's now president of Space Systems over there. I didn't last there long. I didn't get fired. I wanted more responsibility. I was a great opportunity, but I was somebody who really wanted to kind of run projects and do something bigger. So I went with a small company that was a subcontractor, Raytheon, over in St. Pete, called Connex, where I don't know if any of you guys ever, watch a lot of the old movies. You hear about the Javelin anti-tank missile. Anybody ever heard of the Javelin anti-tank missile? Okay. So I designed and built the BCU unit, the battery cooling system. It was really 3 systems: the warhead, the launch tube, and the BCU unit. So I was the designer of the BCU unit for the Javelin anti-tank missile. Got really, kind of into the defense side. I saw an ad for an opportunity at NASA's Johnson Space Center working as a contractor on this new vehicle called the X-38. It's a crew return vehicle. It was a space plane that was intended to be, kind of a lifeboat for if something ever happened on space station that people could escape. So I went there. When I went in and interviewed, the product, the X-38, was actually on the tour. So the tour people were like coming and taking pictures while I'm like interviewing. And I was like, this is just too cool. I can't pass this opportunity up. So I went over there as a contractor with a small company, Rothe joint venture. It was literally myself and 2 other engineers. I built that organization up with the help of a lot of other people, but we built the organization up to over 200 people. And we really took over the whole design lifecycle process around how they went from the engineering concept all the way through to launching the projects up into space, which meant a lot of interactions with astronauts. You guys may be familiar with the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, the underwater laboratory. We were very heavily involved in that, all the testing that went on. What was interesting, and after that, I was given the opportunity to be a civil servant, where I joined NASA as a civil servant. And what was interesting in that career development, I was not the smartest, most technical person in the room. I had a roommate that used to strum his guitar and read the book. He'd kind of look over the example problems and go make an A. I was in the medical library studying till 2 or 3 in the morning, trying to just keep up with him to barely, kind of keep par. So there are people in this classroom, there are people in my peer group that were smarter than me. But what I was never afraid to do was apply innovation to what we were doing. So when I was at NASA, the interesting opportunity was they were taking a very legacy process of how they went from design. They would go build a model, and then they would have them physically tested, and they would, make some modifications. I introduced ergonomic software to how they were evaluating whether or not how things moved in space. So, before VR and ergonomics and those kind of softwares were really available, we were very early cutting edge on that. We brought CAD to CAM. We went part to part without producing paper, right? This is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when everybody's producing physical drawings for everything. We were starting to go completely art to part without creating drawings. So it was around creating an innovative way to approaching things, thinking, man, there's got to be a better way. I always joked around at NASA, that their statement was, why are we doing something this way? And somebody would always say, because back in 1984, this one thing happened, and it was getting people over that hurdle of, that mentality of saying, there's a better way to do something than we're doing it today. So had a great time. I did after the Columbia accident, I was on the return to flight team to get shuttled back to flight. I had originally planned to go to business school the year before. I had made a commitment to the head of engineering, to stick around for return to flight, where I was able to, participate in getting shuttle on its last flights, getting it back up in the air. After that, I decided I wanted to go to business school. I only applied to 2. At that point, I said, I'll just go do an executive. I had no intentions of leaving aerospace when I took on this venture. So I went to the Wharton Business School up at University of Pennsylvania, and I was blown away at how, I figured, we're engineers, right? I'm going to be around a bunch of business students. They can't be that smart, right? And what I realized is there really are a lot of smart people on the business side, right? There are engineering minds in the finance world, in these other areas, and really had a blast there for a couple of years. After that adventure, I'll call it, I thought I was going back to aerospace. I came back to NASA. They were willing to pay for my education, guaranteed them 4 years. This small consulting company called Boston Consulting Group kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, we'd like you to, come over here with us and try consulting. So I got agreement to do half my summer in the consulting world, and I never looked back. I was working on CVS Caremark merger. I worked with the chief marketing officer for Sprint right after they bought another, competitor there, Nextel, which you guys are too young. It was a push to talk thing. It was really big, but they had an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up, and everything was so slow working for the government, and that whole mentality I had about how do we be innovative. This was really an opportunity for me to challenge myself in a different way. So I took a very different path. I spent a few years at the Boston Consulting Group. Then I went on to private equity, where I was kind of an operating participant at the private equity firm, where I was basically the, hey, go solve this problem, or go look at this company and see if the technology really makes sense, or, what the opportunity means for us. I loved it. And I was really enjoying where I was at. They came to me and said, hey, we want to drop you into one of our portfolio companies. It's about to go bankrupt. You're sitting on all these boards. You're telling us how to operate, these companies and how to improve. Now we were going to drop you in and let you go figure it out and show us you can do it. So that put me back in more of the operations side. Never looked back. I would never do advisory again unless I'm on a board of directors. But loved being within the company, within the operations. I really found my niche for these companies of certain sizes, right? Because what I learned in my career is companies that are so big, you get lost in the shuffle, right? Companies that can be so small, sometimes they're not quite funded well. So that can also be frustrating. So there's this middle ground of companies that are nimble enough to still be interactive and fast paced and have lots of responsibilities, but yet also be big enough to have financing and have the things that they need to have. So I've had a nice career through a few companies, and now with Flow Control Group. When I started with Flow Control Group, we were $400 million. What was attractive to me was that it was a very engineering centric company. So what you're going to find, if you go look us up on the website, if you go look up Flow Control Group, you won't see a whole lot. It's going to be very confusing. Who are you? What do you do? I don't really understand from your website. That is intentional, right? We really acquire technical brands, small technical brands, and we basically are the support infrastructure for the small technical brands. So for instance, we've built up an automation and robotics business by acquiring a number of automation and robotics smaller companies around the country, around actually US and Canada, and about to go into the Caribbean, and then eventually into Central America. So this has been kind of our drive, is we can go in, acquire these smaller companies that are very technical, and then we put them together and watch really cool things happen. Now you guys won't appreciate from where you're at, or maybe you do, I don't know, you guys always impress me with how smart you are. We're growing organically at about 20% per year. That business today, less than 3 years that I've been there, is now 1.3 billion. And I'm saying by next year, we'll probably be 1.75, maybe 1.8, close to $2 billion in revenue with over 3,000 employees. Our philosophy is very different. My desire to be entrepreneurial throughout my career is what attracted me here. And what attracted me here is we want people to continue their entrepreneurial spirit within our organization. So we buy a company, we don't take costs out, we don't start ripping the admins out, we don't come in with our branding and our name. That's why you won't really see Flow Control Group on our brands. You'll see on the pamphlet that I had there, you'll see a number of brands. That's where you want to go to their websites and see what they're doing and see what's happening within those brands. When you look at, when I talk about our technical aspects, I'll talk a lot about the robotics and the automation, because that's cool, right? Selling industrial pipe isn't that cool, right? It's not as cool. We do everything in air systems for factories. We do all things related to pump instrumentation. We're probably the leader right now across our industry, technical distribution in e-commerce platforms, right? So we're doing some very innovative things for our area. So if you think about the companies that you do know, right, that you've heard of, Universal Robotics, Emerson, Epson, Mitsubishi, those are all of the products that we bring to the marketplace. So the way our company works is only about 20% of the products we actually manufacture ourselves. We partner with those we call suppliers. They're called principals, the manufacturers. We partner with them. We have technical expertise on those product categories within those end markets. So they don't have a direct sales force that goes out every day. They leverage companies like ours to go in and solve problems for the customers. So what you're seeing in the marketplace is, you think about these big manufacturing companies, the larger companies, they're not as, other than benefits, sometimes it's very difficult for them to hold on to very good technical resources for long periods of time. So they rely on a third party like us to be the technical resource that helps them solve their problems. We have expertise on the products that we sell every day. So I'll give you an example. SpaceX, very big customer of ours. Started off in the Cape. We used to just work with them on instrumentation. One day, one of their guys said, you know what, we're freezing all of the valves. We're freezing because they have cryogenic freezing problems as they're doing the liquid fuels, in preparation for the launch. So all of a sudden, our food and beverage guys are like, oh, we deal with cryogenic valves, all the time. We brought them in. I can tell you, I just got off the phone last night with one of my sales reps who's, beaming. This is being recorded. I can't say how much to buy it. Anyway, we just got a huge, large contract, that's almost going to triple the size of work that we're doing with SpaceX, right? And we didn't manufacture the valve, but we have the ultimate technical expertise on what they needed, and we kind of make that bridge happen. So what's interesting about our organization is the opportunity to be both technical in the field with the customer solving their problems, but also on the sales side, right? So when you come in to Flow Control Group, you have a technical route, obviously, in a sales route. What's even nice on the sales route is, after a certain time in your career, having the opportunity to continue to be a very technical seller. We have some relationship sellers, and so it's a wide variety of. Okay, so you can see our locations here. Actually, this isn't right. We actually have Lake Worth, and we actually have Tampa too. We just started bringing our automation robotics group into Florida, and we'll very soon have something in the Caribbean. I think the interesting thing again about us is that we're very brand centric. So we really adhere to the brands, and we don't really get caught up in us as Flow Control Group. We see Flow Control Group as the holding company, is what we call ourselves. We're backed financially by KKR, one of the largest private equity companies in the world. That's our financial backer. So, investments, getting dollars to make investments is not a challenge for us, but at the same time, we have all these entrepreneurs that are kind of driving innovative ideas. We have this year, so we allow during our budget process for people to come up with ideas about how they want to approach the market. And we funded over 91 unique projects last year. So, kind of innovative. Right now, if you look at what's happening, our air group is developing a monitoring system so they can real-time monitor the air systems that are happening within companies on a real-time basis. That's a project that we're just working with a couple of new customers right now as I'll call it a beta right now. We're getting ready to go live with that, expected for January of 2023. The automation robotics group is taking all the different robotics company and they're developing what we're calling the off-the-shelf robotic solutions. So certain industries just have certain needs. Like in the biomedical, you just need vials filled, right? Instead of having somebody there filling all the vials and going in there checking the levels, automating that, moving parts around a factory floor, being able to, automate the robots, everything from pulling inventory with a robot all the way to placing it in the right location so then parts can then be picked out, and then automating the entire factory floor. There are certain sub-segments of that are very repeatable from one industry to the next. So what they've done is they've given us the ability, this automation team is saying, where can we start selling these things more as off the shelf? So every time we walk into a customer, it's not a unique solution. We can just walk in and say, oh, we already have this solution for you. And then the pump team is really working on engineering systems. So instead of just selling pumps into environments, actually selling complete systems. You guys are familiar with ESG. You guys heard that term before in business, environmental safety and governance. So this has been a big push across the industry. And so monitoring how efficient your operations are, how much heat loss you have, how much energy dissipation, how much energy loss you have in your operations has become very important to where governments are now regulating companies about those things. So we're also bringing in systems that are helping them manage those aspects of their business. So these are just a few of the kind of the projects that we're talking about. And, these are things that the teams are working on. We kind of, joke around that we try to be a little bit like Google in the sense that we give everybody, we call them technology groups. And these technology groups get 20% of their time to go just do fun stuff that's outside of the scope of what they're doing every day and kind of how they operate. What are some new innovative ideas that they're working on? And this is numbered, this presentation was 2 weeks old and it's already outdated. We've got over 67 acquisitions. We just recently acquired 2 more companies, and I think we're up to 180 locations now. You can see the industries we serve. We're really big in Florida and Texas on the aerospace side with Blue Origin and SpaceX. Also with NASA, I actually go down to the Brownsville facility. We were driving by Elon Musk's house. If you guys have seen that, Elon has a house right there in Brownsville, and his gates were open, and his kid's name, like X23 Zeta, whatever his kid's name is, was running around. The guy that I was with, he's like, don't look. And I was like, but you can't look. It's like Elon gets freaked out if people drive by and stare at what's going on over there. So, but really need to be part of what's happening with SpaceX. Having been part of NASA and seeing how slow the government moves, I'm a very big supporter and enthusiast of what's happening with the commercial aerospace side. Medical, we have a whole life sciences division where we're focused on the life sciences business. So I think it's over 100, I want to say 100 to 150 $million. So still relatively small in the grand scheme of things for us today. Mostly up in the Northeast, now moving into Florida, and they're also part of what we're doing in the Caribbean. Electronics and semiconductor, municipal and institutional, guys, things you wouldn't even think about, the heat and steam in these buildings. You guys obviously as engineers think about it. A lot of people don't think about it. We have teams that design the complete laboratories and infrastructure, heat and steam across universities. We have like the largest of that in Canada today. One of the brands we have, Preston Phipps, up in Canada, out of Montreal. Obviously, the new kind of non-combustion power alternative energy is a big driver for us. We're still I think everyone's trying to figure out where everybody plays in here. So understanding the products, the customers we have, and how we play in that. We were very big in moving from coal burning to natural gas burning. Combined cycle power plants, etc. So very big in there. We have a group that meets together just on power generation. So on these these teams we're talking about, the technology group teams, we have these collaboration teams, food and beverage, power generation, that get together and figure out what are the problems that we can solve for our customers. Fuels, chemicals, pulp and paper. There you go. You got the pulp and paper recognition. General industry, industrial. That's kind of a catch-all. There's just a lot of small manufacturing facilities where we're engaged in, and I think that's one of the things that makes us a little bit unique. Is we're not, just one thing. We can be a variety. You could be literally at a small manufacturing plant, earlier in the day, and then be walking into, a Pfizer facility in the afternoon, right? So there's just a lot of diversity in the type of work that we do. We've been this has been a big investment strategy for us, is getting into the water wastewater. We're big into industrial pumps, but we're now starting to transition into water wastewater. So a couple of our big investments for the next couple of years, outside of continued growth here, is in water wastewater and e-commerce. All right. I've talked about this. You guys can see who, kind of the logos of the type of customers that we have. Florida Light and Power here, Duke Energy, on the power generation side. We do have a presence. One thing that's kind of unique about us is we don't have a large oil and gas presence. So we intentionally try to keep our oil and gas exposure below 5%, and that's not an ESG purpose. That's just simply the cyclical nature of that industry. We don't want to be caught when things go down. So when COVID hit, y'all saw companies, kind of really take some hits on that. We went down like maybe 3% on revenue through COVID. Most of all of the products and services that we provide are really MRO oriented, right? So they're not, there's some new capital requirements, but a lot of it is helping these guys better operate what they have existing today. So the good part is we can be, a little cutting edge, we can be entrepreneurial, but at the same time, we can be very secure in the fact that our customer base is not going to ride up and down with the industrials. And I've been at a company that lost 40% of their revenue base literally overnight. So I've felt that pain in my career. So you guys might not appreciate that, unless you've heard the dinner conversation, but that can be painful. These are when you think about the companies that are our manufacturers and suppliers, these are obviously some of the leaders in the world today. I just literally was on a phone call with the folks at Parker, both on their instruments and on their seals and gaskets. Those of you who are going to go into design engineering, you're going to realize that seals and gaskets are actually a big thing. I didn't realize that until I started designing stuff. And then I was like, they said, how are you going to put it all together? And I didn't even realize we're going to do seals and gaskets. And anyway, so you'll learn a lot of interesting things, but you guys can see, really some of the biggest names. And the great thing and the thing that I love about our organization is, if you go to Parker, I love these guys. Just met with them yesterday, fantastic organization, but a very slow moving animal. Things are not going to happen there quickly. We get to be on the street, really, seeing how things are pivoting and being fast moving and tell them what we need. When they do what they call voice of the customer work, when they actually want to talk to customers about what's happening in their marketplaces, they come to us. Flowserve, one of the most recognized names in valves and pumps, they come to us to do voice of the customer work because we have the deep relationships with the customer. And you can see, Universal Robots, Cognex Vision, Vega, some of the other companies here. We're the largest reseller and implementer of the GE, what they call MES software. So MES software is how a factory operates. So putting all the automation around how a factory operates, everything from the panels and the drives and, all the edge devices, everything that you can imagine. We're the largest in North America for General Electric. So again, GE does not have a direct sales force. We are the ones that help actually implement this into the customers at places like Estee Lauder, the United States Post Office, Ocean Spray. I got to see the exact replica, how they go from cranberries to cran apple juice, right? We got to drive every piece of that, kind of implementation. So really a lot of cool stuff from that perspective. I'm just giving up on this. I talked about this, the technology groups is kind of where we do the innovative engineering solutions. And in our mission statement is entrepreneurial and entrepreneurship. And I think it's important to realize this because a lot of our brands that we buy are small companies, right? They're $20, $25 million companies. So they're very, very entrepreneurial. Here was typically an engineer or a sales rep who got tired of working for the bigger company, broke off, started their own thing, had some backing, and somehow made it, right? Kind of the 10 people tried, one person made it, right? So this person has built their entire organization on being entrepreneurial, and then they sell to us, and then they're hoping like heck we don't ruin it, right? Is kind of the thought process. So what we've done is we've built our entire infrastructure around supporting the brands and the entrepreneurs, right? So a lot of these folks could retire, could leave. They financially have had enough success that they could walk away. And they tell us when we acquire them, they say, I'll be around for 12 to 18 months to help you transition. I had a gentleman that he actually runs our automation group. He told me that I'd have to take a crowbar to pry him out of his chair if I wanted him to leave at this point because he's having a blast. So what we've tried to really do is create this environment where the entrepreneurs that got saddled with doing HR and IT help desk, and as a smaller company, those are the things you do, right? I mean, you're the cleaning service, you're everything for these smaller companies. We take that as a holding company and put that over here and let the teams go focus on growing their businesses and having fun with the customers. And what we're finding is that the growth we're seeing once we do that is tremendous. So if a company is growing, all the companies are growing at some level, or most of them, when we acquire them. Our average growth rate after acquisition is 2.5 times. So if somebody's growing at 5% a year, after we acquire them, they start growing at 12.5% a year. We had a small automation company in Canada and have one branch in France that we bought this year, grew almost 100%. Now, it's a small company, but trying to grow even a small company at 100%, attracting people, getting the talent there. I mean, it's a very fast-paced environment at the brand level. So, we celebrate this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? We don't want to become a big company. We leave the brands intact. You see the names that are on those sheets. Those are the ones you guys want to look up and say, hey, what are these guys doing? Who are the brands that are associated with these? Because Flow Control Group is something you'll see on LinkedIn. You'll see at events like this, but it's really not an operating entity. One of the things I'm introducing to the organization. It's taking a lot of people to do it, but philosophically, something I wanted to bring to the company when I came here. Like I said, when I came to the company, it's 400 million. Now we're 1.3 billion today, on our way to 2 billion. So one of the things that I really wanted to do is focus on what's career pathing and development. Because as a small company, when it's owned by an individual owner, you're not thinking about career development for your teammates, right? You probably have 10, 15 people in the office, 4 or 5 sellers, a couple of inside sellers, some admin support staff. You're not thinking about that. All of a sudden, you're part of a multi-billion-dollar organization. What are you doing to create career development tracks for your teammates? So that's what we've really started to do. We're starting to see movements between the brands, right? Somebody who has great expertise, and we just had this on vision systems, is now looking to move out to the Pacific Northwest. Family reasons, wants to move out to the Pacific Northwest. Well, the Pacific Northwest had a need with one of our brands out there for vision systems. So how do we enable that? So we're starting to look at the career track of people coming into the organization. How do they progress all the way from, an incoming engineer all the way to the, president of one of the operating groups, president of one of the brands? That's my job. How do we get somebody there? What is the career development tracking that we do? So it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, coming in as an engineer, we have steps that people can take. Now it'll modify a little bit depending on what area they go into. But what we find is that there's people that they love the engineering aspect of it, but they also love the sales aspect of it. So they want to move into the sales engineering side, still being technical. The products we sell are technical, but move into that sales side. They like being in front of the customer. They like solving problems. That's what really kind of drives them. And we have some people that are like, I don't want to be in front of people. I don't want to be in front of a customer. I just feed me really tough problems and let me solve those. That's what I really, really enjoy. So, having an ability for people to translate through those different career tracks and having, career progression for them. So something we've been really driven on within our organization is building this out. This was the first year that we really started rolling this out this last year across the organization. So again, a younger organization, but trying to bring some of that development. I think I just kind of talked about this. This is actually, I'll tell you guys a funny story here. So this young man from Virginia Tech, this guy's from North Carolina State. So this is a robotics cell that they were working on in Charlotte Assembly Center, as you can see. And I walked in and they said, we got a big project and all of our new engineers are all kind of working on this project because it's out of Charlotte. And one of our big robotics hubs is in Charlotte. So I go there and sitting at the table is a gator chair. And I'm just like beaming with pride. I'm like, all right, who's the gator? And the guy comes up, he's like, well, it's my chair. I'm sort of a gator. I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, he's in North Carolina State. He grew up a Gator fan. His parents were Gators. They moved to North Carolina for work. He said they couldn't afford the out-of-state tuition, so I went to North Carolina State, but I'll always be a Gators fan. So I was joking around. I said, well, we'll get some real Gators as part of the team here. But this is a robotic cell that they're working on. This is the kind of robot that they're called collaborative robots. You guys know what a collaborative robot is, the difference? So cobots, that's a term you'll hear. So collaborative robots means that you have people working around it, right? So there's sensors associated with it. So if it touches or hits somebody, it's not just going to continue its movement and harm somebody. You go to some factories and look at the robotic cells and what's going on, and they're in cages, right? You get a person around there, everything has to be shut down. There's lockout, tag out, safety precautions that are taken for if you're going to be around the robot. Whereas here, a lot of what we do is on the collaborative robot side. So you won't see us, we're not trying to assemble cars. We're not trying to do, the big, large robotic projects. We're really looking for those projects that are like $1 million or less that are, walking into, this is probably a $20 million company that had 18 people doing the most manual tasks. The turnover in the workforce is terrible. They can't get people to come in, week out. The work is monotonous and boring. The pay ranges went from $14 an hour, and now it's like $25 an hour just to get employees to show up on a regular basis. So they're like, we need some help. This was an idea to bring this to a robotic solution. So really cool stuff that was going on here. One of the biggest challenges, you can see these fittings right here. There's 2 O-rings inside. This is actually high pressure fittings that go into a factory that provide air for pneumatic systems within a company. I think those were going to Nestle. We're building the systems out for Nestle right now. And what was interesting is they couldn't drop the O-rings in, right? So there's 2 O-rings interior here, and to drop an O-ring in, and then, okay, we flip it and drop the other O-ring in. Yeah, that makes sense, but it takes a lot of time because then another robot has to grab it, turn it upside down and position it. So all these guys have been working on this thing about how can we get this thing to 15 seconds, right? And how can we drop 2 O-rings in here with like a 99.8% confidence assurance that the O-rings are going to drop in properly. So, that it probably sounds like a project you guys would be working on here, and that's real life. That's what these guys were working on. We're still struggling with the O-rings, by the way. Our company is, if you look up, you guys go online and look at KKR and CHI overhead doors, Minnesota rubber. There's a concept that KKR has been really a world leader in an equity for all package. Pete Stavros of KKR, he's kind of the head of the industrial, not kind of, he is the head of the industrials at KKR. As you guys may not know, KKR, one of the largest private equity companies in the world. His father, from what I understand from the story, was a unionized railroad guy who didn't understand why more people weren't owners of companies. So as he made his ranks through the ranks at KKR, he decided he was going to deploy that mentality out across the organization. So what KKR has done, which has just been groundbreaking and unique, is they've carved out a big chunk of the equity of the company and basically given that to the employees. So what that means is you guys may not understand how all this works, but private equity buys a company, and just like a publicly traded company, they just own the equity by themselves, and then they'll peel off a little bit to certain levels of management, depending on how private equity works. Then what they do is over the course of usually 5 to 7 years, they're trying to double or triple the company, and then when that company sells its equity position, they make 85 to 90% of the profits in that process. What they've done is they've now carved out a big chunk and said, no, we're not doing this alone. The employees need to participate in this. So guys, this is not insignificant amount of money. 1,000 employees, every person in the company, if we hit our target, we can go above our target and continue to earn above our target, would make 8 months of their salary in a one-time bonus at the time of a transaction. So everybody in the company, regardless of role, 8 months of your salary in a one-time bonus. CHI overhead doors they sold it 10 times instead of 3 times. So their numbers were like, people were making 3, 4, 5 times their annual salary in a one-time bonus. So they're sharing in all the profits. Their equity position that they own is the exact same equity that goes in the ownership for all. So this is a really big deal for us across the company. So everybody who's a part of the company is an I'm an owner, is kind of follows the I'm an owner theme. Every brand, every branch has a party around this on a kind of annual basis on a renewal. I do a PowerPoint voiceover that goes out to the whole company every month, and it really kind of provides them, hey, what are we doing to act like owners? Who's saving costs? Who's coming up with a unique idea, right? We kind of really celebrate that across the entire company. So I think it's a a unique thing where, most companies you guys go to, think about it, okay, if you're there 5, 6 years, maybe you get some stock options eventually, and hopefully the company does well. The good thing here is it's a very, kind of fast turnaround. Private equity is really only in your company each time about, 5 to 7 years and maximum. Something that we brought to the organization is we don't believe our job is just to be an economic center. It's also to be a community participant. So we look very carefully at what we're doing within our communities. We're teamed up with the Children's Miracle Network. And what that does is, we really like this charity because we have a tagline that says many companies, but one team. And what I really like about the Children's Miracle Network is all the children's hospitals across North America, right, that are allocated in many cities, almost always in the cities for which we also participate economically. So all the funds that are raised in a particular city, so let's say St. Louis, we've got like 6 different businesses in St. Louis. So they're gonna have a big fundraiser in St. Louis. All the money that's raised will go to the St. Louis Children's Hospital. All the volunteer activities that we participate in St. Louis will be for the St. Louis Children's Hospital. We just had our kickoff event in Charlotte, North Carolina, and raised $70,000 at our first event for the Charlotte Children's Hospital. And we had a guest speaker there. One of the kids that was the recipient has had 4 heart surgeries. Just a fan. If you want to see yourself cry as a young adult, go listen to one of those stories of these kids that have been helped from the community. So, it's something that we're very passionate about, is going beyond just being an economic center, that we also are finding ways to participate within our community. So trying to, create a bit of a different way of thinking about participating. And think about it, when you're a small company, yes, maybe the owner was involved in a local charity that you kind of knew about or were happy about, that you were involved with that, and the company was somewhat tied to it. But this has been really groundbreaking for a lot of these brands to be a part of. All right, so, you can see this. My Canadian guys, Preston Phipps isn't on here. We break up into what we call operating groups. And these operating groups then have all these brands. So you can see the brands here that we have, and you guys will get a copy of these. So, it's one of these things where we'll be participating with you guys. We're just now getting involved with the University of Florida, obviously driven by me because I'm a graduate here. We are going to be getting engaged with other engineering schools, engineering-centric schools. We've got a pipeline into places like Virginia Tech and some others. But, we are really excited about the opportunity to start really developing that pipeline of talent from the collegiate level, or recently, and then all the way into the workforce and providing career paths. So that's who we are, guys. I'll stop there and open it up to you guys for questions. I'm happy to talk about anything you guys want to talk about. It doesn't have to just be about flow control group. If you want to talk about, NASA transitioning from engineering to business, anything that's on y'all's mind, I would be very, very open to the discussion while I'm here. Is that helpful? Confusing?
You've got your first question over there.
Yes, sir.
Could you talk about your experience and how much business school added to your value as an employee and moving from an individual contributor to management?
Yeah, good question. What's your name and where are you from?
I'm Andrew from Houston.
Really? All right. I live in Katy.
Oh, we live south of Sugar.
Okay. Yeah, we're neighbors.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I would say that the engineering gave me a very, very strong understanding. I went several years longer before getting my MBA than a number of my colleagues. A lot of people, they'll kind of tell you 3 to 5 years, go get your MBA. I was having a blast with my career. I didn't even think about my MBA until like my 8th year. And I'm like, God, the government's so slow and boring, and I'd really get an MBA. And so I didn't have some big, hey, kind of master plan. Maybe that's not the right thing that I should be saying. That
I don't ever say there's a common path.
So I didn't have a master plan on it. I just said, I'm just having a blast with my career, and then I wasn't. Programs are getting shut down. The administration that was in there, the president and the administration was shutting programs down, curbing spending. a lot of stuff going on. I was like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this for the next, kind of 10 years where this thing's going. So then it was kind of like, okay, what can I do? To answer your question directly about, kind of the transition, I would say even in engineering, there was definitely a lot of management and leadership. I would say the difference of what I got is, there's a great book that I read when I was here at University of Florida, Rene Descartes' Discourse on Method, which is basically the explanation of the scientific method process, which is what they're infusing in you on a regular basis, right? How do I think about solving problems? That's what I got here that was crucial, right? What I got when I went to business school was more of the frameworks, the business related frameworks of how I could apply it differently than what I did here. Because I would actually almost say that my education continuum, I put Wharton and Boston Consulting Group together because it was kind of like Wharton gave me the academic underpinning, but then Boston Consulting Group kind of threw me out in the world and said, go solve these problems for people using some of that academic underpinning. That makes sense. So I would say the management leadership started clearly in engineering, well before I ever got to the business school aspect, but the business school aspect definitely honed my skills very differently. And frankly, just to share with you, I knew nothing when I went to business school. I mean, the guy sat next to me on a bus. We had to, we didn't know who was on our learning team. They had like 3 big buses that took us up into the woods, and you spent 2 or 3 days figuring out who was going to be on your learning team. They already had pre-designed, but it was like exercises to get you there. And I sat next to this guy on the bus, Peter Devalier, won't forget him. So sitting next to him on the bus, and he goes, I'm in banking, right? And here I'm an engineer from NASA. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, what does that mean? I'm in banking, right? So I asked him, and he just kind of shrugged me off and, asked what I did. And I told him, and then I said, no, I'm serious. I want to understand in banking, what did you do? And he was a French guy, and he got kind of dismissive with me. And I was like, so I'm trying to be clear. So I said, okay, you walk in the bank. I said, you got the tellers over here. You got the person who greets you. There's 3 people in an office over here. I still don't know what they do. And you got some people in the cubes. Who are you in that setting? Literally, he got up, walked out of the seat, and sat in the back of the bus. So I realized real quick, I was like, okay, I'm out of my element, right? In business school, and then I realized how smart everybody was, and kind of the intellectual capital that was there. But it really gave me confidence around. I've been a CFO twice. I would have never done it from an engineering, but the engineering mindset made me very comfortable to kind of understand how the accounting mindset is, which allowed me to, I think, be successful. But I would have never been able to go from my education at Florida as an aerospace mechanical engineer and transition that to being a CFO. It really took some of the technical aspects I needed to learn there as well. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
What else out there? Yes. What, you got to tell me your name and where you're from.
My name is Divya. I'm
Divya.
from India. I
Okay.
just joined this call. I'm computer science.
Okay, excellent.
So my question is, it's again tailored towards a business school, your time during the business school. So how did the shift in mindset happen? You are from an engineer, you were working as an engineer, and it's mostly got to do with technical aspects, right? And
Yes.
when you go to business school, it's completely different. You got to come up with you're probably working on your ideas, making sure. I think most important aspect of it is convincing people of it.
Right.
So did you already have that mindset when you were in the business school, or how did the transition happen for you?
I think I developed that mindset as an engineer, and business school helped accentuate it, right? I really, because if I go back to my career development, right, at NASA, it wasn't about being the smartest technical person. It was about stepping back and saying, are we doing that right? I mean, I built a group of those 3 of us. When I left, it was like 200, right? So that was really building an engineering infrastructure. That when I became a civil servant, one of the last jobs I held was the chief technology officer for the engineering division at Johnson Space Center. And so what was interesting about that is I couldn't be the smartest person on a particular technology. I mean, I had a PhD, he's now a professor at Rice on nanotechnology. I wasn't going to out nanotechnology, right? We had different PhD level, very deep thinkers on particular subjects. My job was more on the commercialization side. Is this something that's commercially viable? Is this something that would be valuable to industry and other applications just outside of what we're discovering here for this particular application at NASA? So I already had that bent and desire. I could go in and solve problems. I had proven my, kind of value on the technical side. I started getting more excited about those types of scenarios than I did working on the technical side, right? So those things made it more fun. We built the organization. I had a little break room that had a hammock and posters on the wall of like tropical areas and, where our bookshelf were. And I said, hey, if you guys just want to go think about something, people thought I was crazy. They're like, what are you doing? Right? We're at NASA. What are you putting in this room over here? Right? I would bring my dog to work on Saturdays and let them roam the halls, right? Because I was one of these crazy people that would work on the weekends. So, it was just kind of having that attitude. And I think people really kind of, gravitated to that type of, genuine kind of solving problems, but, kind of being leaders and looking out a little bit differently. So by the time I got to business school, it was more of, I felt like I had a lot to learn. You go to business school here, undergrad, they're the ones that start drinking on Wednesday, right? Right? I mean, we all know it, right? Engineers are working, we'll party on the weekends, but usually during the week, we're pretty cranked in trying to get stuff done. You go to the business school, like, what are you doing? I'm studying Tuesday, I'm good, right? It was a different level there because I didn't have the underpinning that these had. I mean, I was sitting in the room with people that have been at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, private equity groups. I mean, Wachovia. I mean, these were like really, talented folks at a deep level of financial engineering. So to me, that was the wide awakening to me at school was like, oh God, I really got to learn. This is not just, hey, transition. I'm going to go to Boeing and Lockheed. Now I got an MBA. I'm this. I was like, wow, I really got to focus and learn. So I really, kind of put the foot to the metal on learning. Got involved in a lot of teams and stuff. And this is one of the things we didn't have when I was at Florida that I just absolutely love about what's going on here is at Penn, I was on teams. I traveled, right? And I was like one of the oldest students at UPenn, but what's that movie where the guys go to Google as interns, and they're like 10 years older than all the other interns. I felt like that was me at Wharton sometimes. I was literally like 5 years older than most of the other interns there. But I was on every competition I could get my hands on. I was out in Stanford. We competed and won a business competition. I presented to Yahoo. I ended up with job offers at Google, all this kind of stuff. I got really engaged in team projects and doing those kind of things because I think it's so important to understand. I think that's where you'll really have that elevation opportunity amongst your peers when you're working. What else out there? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Teresa Ferguson, computer science, and I'm wondering with the number of companies that you're acquiring in the area of support, and you're talking about some of them are slow movers, some of them are on board quickly. There's a lot of diversity.
Yes.
Do you have a methodology that you use for selecting which companies you work for or work with?
Yes.
And if you do have that methodology, are there companies that you turned down or removed association with?
Yes. So to all those. And so what we do is when we go acquire a company, mostly our growth is through acquisition of our supplier base. So we know the suppliers we like to work with and the ones we stay away from. So when we go look at a company, we have a very specific criteria that we look at one of these brands. And we say, do they check the boxes on all of these things? The first thing we look for is technical competency. Are they recognized as a technical leader? Do they have that customer loves them, needs them? My gosh, don't let anything happen to them. Put a bubble around them because they solve our problems and help us, kind of resolve everything we have internally. Then we look if there's a supplier conflict. One thing we do with the suppliers I showed you on there, I can't buy Swagelok brand that's going to interfere with Parker because Parker is going to get mad at me, right? So we're very big about no conflict. Then we start the due diligence process, right? And so we do the due diligence process on 3 elements. It's financial due diligence, it's legal due diligence, and then it's people due diligence. We're very big about that. And we're trying to understand who we're about to get invested with, who they are as a leadership team, who they are as a person, what they mean. Are they involved in the community? Do they roll their eyes at that kind of stuff? Where are they emotionally, and professionally? And then from there, we come together as a leadership team and make a decision to go forward with one of the acquisitions. So that's typically how our process rolls. From the time we meet somebody and we introduce ourselves, the average is 3 years before they're ready to sell us a company. And then once we get the green light that they're like, okay, we see what you're all about. We hear it in the market that what you're telling us is not just some story, it's what you guys live by. Then we can get a deal closed in about 90 days at that point. But that's the process we go through. But a lot of times it's a relationship that's developed over years. And then, and different strokes for different folks. The founder of the company is still with us today. He runs our M&A. He is a sales guy as it gets. So as soon as it's a very engineering centric organization, he was, Raymond, I need you up in Burlington, Vermont. You need to talk to these guys. And he'll tell me, he says, my shtick doesn't work here, right? Because he's a sales guy. But yeah, that's how we kind of go through that process.
Thank you. And then the decision to part ways. On the supplier base, that's always about credibility, integrity is, I would say, the number one thing with a supplier, because it's an interesting relationship we have with our suppliers, because we own the customer, but they own the product. There's times when historically suppliers have had small distributors, so they've been able to flex and tell them what to do. Now that they have a company who in some cases is, we have some suppliers that are much larger than us. We have many suppliers who are smaller than us. Some of the biggest names in robotics outside of the big robots, but like Universal Robotics, some of the sensor companies, Mir, SICK, all these other guys, they're smaller than us. And so they can't just push us around like they did kind of in the old school. They really need to partner with us. So we're taking on a different relationship. That's one of the things that's kind of uniquely different about us. So we try to really covet relationships, right? We're ethics, do what you say. We just dropped a line because of that. They told us one thing. They went and did something different and then tried to give us a bunch of excuses as to why they did it. But what they did was unethical. And we dropped them. We picked up a new line and we just got a $14 million contract with the new line. And from what I just talked about, I was actually talking to the guy last night. And the competitor, I guess, found out, the former supplier found out about it. So those things kind of work themselves out, but really it's about integrity. In our business, it's doing what you said you're going to do with the supplier base. Thank you.
Yeah. What else out there, guys?
I have a question similar to like hers. I don't know if you just answered it or not, but I was wondering if you had any like failed acquisitions kind of like on that front end of things. You just said like parting ways after it's already said and done, but like.
You're going to be a good interview. That's always the question you're going to get in an interview is how did you fail? And then what did you learn from the failure? So it's really good. I wouldn't say we've had any failures yet. I would say that we have had some that have not met our strategic objectives. And what we've learned mostly is it ends up being people related. It has very little to do with did we technically see the opportunity, right or wrong. Now we've had some initiatives that we've invested in that I think we missed a little bit on what the market was looking for. So we've had some failures on some organic initiatives. On the acquisitions, people are fickle. And it's interesting when you are working in a $20 million company and a $1 billion company comes in and buys your organization, the glass shatters, right? Because the concept that people had about working for this small company, and I'm really rallying around Susie and, everything Susie does. And, it's kind of like they're really tied to that owner. And then all of a sudden that owner walks in one day and says, hey, surprise, we sold the company. And yeah, it's this $1 billion company. Look at everything's gonna be same, everything's gonna be, good. Don't worry about it. I really like these guys. That next kind of 90 to 120 days is a roller coaster. We have had situations where on the end of that roller coaster, people are like, I get it. We're here, excited. We've turned the corner. I'd say over 90% of those have happened We've had two that I gotta say, they did not end where we wanted it to end. We had people that we did not want to leave that we recognized were key components of the company that left the organization because they were like, I want to be part of a small entrepreneurial company and you guys are, big company and, and they just had their mindset already there. So I would say in those cases, we've never had a spectacular economic failure, but I would say in both of those cases that I'm thinking about, we're not seeing the growth that we had hoped for, but then we're spending a lot of time and energy because there's not a whole bunch of us at the flow control group level, at the holding company level. So there's not like a team of people to parachute in when you have a problem. When you're parachuting in and you have a problem with one of these brands like this, you're pulling people out that could be helping grow the business to focus on resolving an issue, but you got to do it. So I would consider those, what I would consider failures.
Gotcha. And so you said that there's not a lot of people at the full control group level. In terms of like partnering with all of these companies, would you say that people at that level do a lot more traveling to different sites and different customers, and then the people who work for the specific companies, they're more centralized around like where they already work? Like they were smaller companies, they're not going to be having customers like that they're visiting like everywhere.
Yeah, it's different by the brand. So some brands have outreach beyond just a territorial boundary, and especially now being partnered with us,
Yeah.
they really have opportunities. So SimTech was North Carolina. Now which is one of our robotics groups, they're now in North Carolina, they're now in Virginia, moving in South Carolina, they just got Florida. I mean, so they're hustling. This has been like literally in 18 months, they're starting to pick up new territories. So that's been fantastic to see. No, I would say a lot of the flow control group is support function. So it's finance, accounting, tax, legal, audit, HR. Like when I talk about my operations lead at flow control group, who's in Houston with me, he's like setting up contracts with Staples and Granger and doing like, scale purchases and things like that. It's really the boring back office stuff. Now I brought a team to do that so that I could go do more of the fun stuff. So I travel all over the place. So an operating group president or a group president, they're traveling a lot, right? They're working with multiple businesses. Each individual brand, some are very close and some of them are multiple states. So like, we have companies that are both Florida and Georgia. So you'll have Atlanta, Augusta, Fort Walton, Jacksonville, Tampa, right? So you'll have a variety. So it just depends on, is that brand set up where it's like they're set up by in market, where this is the person that walks into all the pulp and paper plants, regardless of where they're at, or they set up in geography. So it doesn't matter what the industry is. And that person would walk in, from morning to afternoon would be two completely different industries. So it also will pivot. Some of the brands are set up by end markets. Some of them are set up by geography. And we don't try to drive and change that. We don't come into the business and try to change it. We're everybody on our flow control group at the leadership side on the operations is technical in nature. Engineers, people who understand the technologies. My robots guys got mad at me because I started involving myself in the analytics on that O-ring issue, where I was like in their design meetings. They're like, really, you're in our design meetings? I was like, yes, I'm having fun. So we try to participate as we need to, but we also try not to overreach into the company. We want them to be their brand. And that's why we're having such good organic growth from them, because we're giving them things they didn't have before. We're taking things off their plate that they didn't want to do. And we're giving them financial freedom and some, some entrepreneurship to continue to do the things that they're doing. Yes, sir.
We'll wrap this up as the last question, then we'll let you chat with students offline.
Okay. Well, I gotta get your name and where you're from.
I'm Mark, I'm from Sarasota. So the internship and the technical career path you were talking about.
Yes.
Is that within the individual brands or is that within the flow control group?
No, that would be within the individual brands. So when we are here for the Career Expo at the end of this month, we will have people from those individual brands as part of that discussion. I think on the first non-technical day, we'll have like marketing and one of the finance leads from one of the operating groups and some folks there. But on the technical day, my goal is to have 3 or 4 of the brands, people from the brands here to talk to you about specifically, what they're doing and the opportunities that exist within those brands. But yeah, the internship would be at the brand. That's the goofiness of us being a holding company, because you're going to know a flow control group, but yet we're really, again, the tagline, many companies, but one team. So the one team is flow control group, but the companies is where you would, where you would intern.
And with the partial ownership thing that you were talking about, like everyone's an owner, how did, when that was implemented, how did the growth of the company change, and how did that, like, how did the partial ownership segment thing change the company and how it worked?
Well, I will tell you, we just deployed that about 18 months ago, so still very early. This year's growth was phenomenal. We do what they call a Gallup poll survey. So every year, everybody in the company does a survey about how we're doing as a company, as a management team, and multiple questions they answer. The change and transition from last year's survey to this year's survey, it was transformational. I mean, literally, I just got from the learning and development lead, I just saw yesterday our scores, and it was like rock star change from where we were a year ago to today. So people, that wasn't just the employee ownership, that was one piece of it. But people are really rallying behind this concept that they get to be an owner of the company. So economically, hey, we can grow 20% a year for the next several years. I think that'll speak for itself. But I think we're definitely seeing through Gallup poll survey and performance of the business, people are really buying into it and feeling a part of it. The hardest thing, honestly, is to get over the skepticism. People that have been in industry for 30, 40 years are like, I've heard this kind of crap before, and it's not, it's getting over that mentality by showing them the CHI overhead doors, the Minnesota rubber and plastic, those examples of these are real, these are success stories that are happening. This is just got shown on CNBC, it's in the Wall Street Journal. That's where we're, kind of relying on KKR and their success with their other companies to let people know it's real, and we're having success with it.